Hi, welcome back. My name is Ann Crawford, and I'm the Reference and Adult Services Librarian at the Ponte Vedra Beach Branch Library. And you're joining me for part 2 of Read-Alikes to the Library Book by Susan Orlean, which is our St. John's Read selection for 2021. Now, if you joined me for part 1, I was talking about the kinds of books you might be inspired to read after you read the library book. Sometimes when you read a really good story, you're then turned on to that subject, to that topic, to the kinds of ideas that book has inspired in you. And so I'm here to give you a little shortcut about the kinds of books that you might be interested in after reading the library book. In my first presentation, I talked about books dealing with true crime, as well as about the library itself, and about different kinds of books that you can read in the library, because those are all things that were discussed in the library book. If you remember reading the library book by Susan Orlean, you'll notice that at the beginning of every chapter, she would list Dewey Decimal numbers for subject areas. And if you're not aware, most books are categorized, cataloged, I should say, by the Dewey Decimal System, at least in public libraries. I think usually the Library of Congress is used in academic libraries. So in public libraries, the Dewey Decimal System is used to categorize different subjects. So for example, your nonfiction 200s are your religion books. 641s would be your cookbooks. 917s, those would be your travel books, and so on and so forth. So that you could basically go to anywhere in nonfiction, whether it's for kids, for teens, for adults, and find the subjects that you're interested in it. And so I thought that was a really neat way that she started each chapter of each book, kind of talking about these are the topics that we're going to talk about in this chapter, and these are the Dewey Decimal numbers that go with them. Now, I'm not going to give any spoilers to the library book, but if you have read it, or even if you haven't, the library book is the true crime story of the burning, the arson, if you will, of the Los Angeles Public Library in the 80s, and it's an unsolved true crime, though Susan Orlean does give a very convincing argument for who she thinks is responsible for that fire. And after having read that book, I'd be hard-pressed to argue with her. But still, no one has been arrested for that particular fire in all these many years. Now, I mentioned in my first presentation, I stand by what I said. The library book, more than just being a true crime story, is a love letter to libraries. And again, you might think, well, someone burned the library. How's that a love letter to libraries? Because the arson of the library is a part of the story. It's the leaping off point, if you will. But really what the library book is about is what happens in the aftermath. The library has burned, a community institution that people come and work in, volunteer in, visit, utilize. It's a part of the community and the neighborhood that is just seen as kind of indispensable and just a part of everything. What happens when all of that is dismantled, when all of that is gone, when it is completely changed how people can use that institution? And that's what the book is about. The book is about how did it impact the patrons, the volunteers, the library staff, the city officials, the people in the community that use that library for a number of reasons. Maybe they read books there, they went to programs, they studied, they used it as a community center, or simply they went to the library just to see other people that may be living alone or having a lonely sort of life. The library gave them a place to be and to feel valued and wanted and needed and welcomed. So one of the reasons that the St. John's Reads Committee, of which I was a part, chose the library book, besides it being a book of great merit, and Susan Orlean is a very interesting author, and the library book, for example, I believe in later 2021, it's going to be turned into a mini-series, or maybe just, I think it's actually maybe just a series, which I think will be very interesting to portray. One of the additional reasons that we chose the library book is because it talks about what happens when a completely unexpected and devastating event occurs that changes and upends everything. How does the library pivot on a dime and still remain valuable and integral in the lives of its patronage, of its community members, of all the people who use the library and value it. And we found a real resonance and connection to our own situation with COVID-19. Now, thank goodness, COVID-19 did not burn down the library. The libraries are still here, and we're incredibly grateful for that. But I'll never forget how last March, everything just seemingly changed overnight. We went from being open as usual on a Saturday to the next 2 weeks. We were closed, but we were here behind the scenes getting any number of projects done, trying to get all of our ducks in a row because we were suddenly being told to do virtual programming. And we had never really done virtual programming before. We didn't necessarily have the equipment, we didn't necessarily have the experience, and there was the editing and the uploading. And suddenly it was like, well, this is what we're gonna do. And sure enough, 2 weeks after that, everybody was sent home, and we were all just basically expected to start virtually programming every week. So thank goodness to the friends of the Ponte Vedra Beach Branch Library, I got the equipment that I needed, and I started filming from home. You may remember virtual programs that I presented back on my lanai in my backyard. And that's just what we did. We pivoted on a dime, and we just kept on moving. And so we found a lot of connection with the library book. And fortunately, like the library book, we found an incredible amount of support from our patrons and from our volunteers and from our friends at the library that really helped us keep going and reinvent ourselves. And I really appreciate reading about that in the library book, about how incredibly loved and valued that library was, and how much people didn't just talk about how they missed their library. They rolled up their sleeves, they got out there, and they did the dirty work, and dirty work it was, because that library was full of smoke. There was a ton of water damage. I can only imagine what it must have been like to walk through the doors and see that utter devastation in front of them. One of the things that was so incredibly sad in the library book, which is not a spoiler, you can well imagine this, there were many floors to the Los Angeles Public Library. It's a huge library. And unfortunately, the part of the library that burned, one of the parts of the library that burned, was a place that had a lot of archives. And these particular archives were old, rare materials that only existed at that library. And because of that fire, we no longer had them. There is no second, third, fourth, 500th copy of a particular book or recipe or things like that. These were things that were absolutely one of a kind, irreplaceable, and we no longer have. So it just made you realize just how much they lost. They didn't just lose the New York Times best-selling books, which, by the way, I don't want to lose anything in the library, but they didn't lose something that they could have perhaps readily replaced. They lost things that were irreplaceable. So like I said, the people in the library book really made a big impression on me, and the many ways a library serves its people and its community, and how different libraries serve such different communities was really impactful to me as a librarian. And I hope if you've read the book or are thinking of reading the book, will be for you as a patron, because it just goes to show that the public library is for everyone. It's not for one kind of person or for one kind of reader or one kind of library user. It's for everyone, all of you. We welcome you in our front doors. So I thought I'd dive in with my first read-alike, which is, this is what a librarian looks like. Well, I'm a librarian. I look like this. You'll note I'm not wearing big glasses. I don't have my hair up in a bun or a second pair of glasses on top of my head or a bunch of dust falling out of my hair. Although, if I did, absolutely no judgment, because honest to goodness, it would be very easy for me to have a pair of glasses on my face and absent-mindedly have another set sitting on top of my head. When my hair was longer, I did wear it in a bun from time to time, and I can assure you, if you get out in the stacks and you start shelving books, you're gonna encounter some dust, because that's just the nature of libraries. So one of the things I love about this book, and you can't really see the cover super well here, but if you ever check this book out from the library, you'll see that a librarian does not look alike. You've got all sorts of people here. You've got young people, you've got older people, you've got people of all sorts of different races and genders, and without being able to talk to all these people, no doubt different walks of life. They've studied different things in college. They've had numerous different experiences. They came into librarianship for all number of reasons, some of them as a second career, some of them as a first career. I mean, and that is one of the most interesting things for me, having worked in a library for 17 years, is the people I've gotten to know on the staff, because they bring with them this really fascinating wealth of knowledge and experience that, yes, you could look up the answer, but sometimes your best answers to patrons' questions are right there on your staff. So I think that's really interesting. For example, in our library system, if you are a librarian, like I am, I'm a reference and adult services librarian. I was a youth services librarian for many years. Also our branch managers and things like that. To be in one of those positions, you had to have a master's in library science. However, your undergraduate degree, your bachelor's degree, can be in anything. So while we may share that master's degree in library science, our backgrounds before that are all different subject areas and walks of life. And, you know, some people went straight from their bachelor's to their master's to get their library degree. Others, like I said, with second careers, came back and got their master's in library science later in life, had all that life experience to then apply to the job. So that's one of the wonderful things about this is what a librarian looks like, because it really dismantles that stereotype of who librarians are. Talks about celebration of libraries, communities, and access to information for all. So I really, really recommend it, because like I said, libraries sometimes get an unfair rap of what librarians look like and what librarians are gonna do, you know, and you know, that don't touch the books and everything like that, or you know, libraries are super quiet places where you could hear a pin drop, and it's not true. We want you to check out the books. It's not a museum, though I love museums. We want you to take out the books. We might wear our hair in a bun. We might not wear our hair in a bun. We might be a little dusty, that's true. Generally, we're not telling you to shh. If anything, we're encouraging you to engage with other people. And if you've ever been to a children's program before, and I say this with great love and devotion, having been a youth services librarian for many years before becoming a reference and adult services librarian, sometimes we encourage you to get pretty loud and pretty rowdy and have a lot of fun. So don't judge a library just by what you've heard about it. Come in the front doors and find out what it's all about. Now, here we go. The Maximum Security Book Club. Whoa, what is this? Reading literature in a men's prison. Well, this title attracted me immediately because I actually went to school, graduate school, with a woman who was a prison librarian, who became a prison librarian. I thought, well, that is a really interesting direction to take. And one of the things she told me that was reaffirmed in this book is the impact book clubs can have in prisons. When the inmates have an opportunity to get together and talk about things and be respected for having these ideas and having these thoughts and having these discussions. So it's a really exciting thing to get into. So absolutely love the fact that they were willing to do a book that was so incredibly different, the Maximum Security Book Club, because that's the really neat thing about libraries is that there isn't just one kind of library. You have academic libraries, you have public libraries, you have special libraries, you have music libraries, and you have outreach events at daycares and at schools and at nursing homes and even in prisons. So the library really is devoted to reaching out to all the people in the community, both the people who come in the doors and the people that we leave the library to go and connect with to make a positive difference in their lives. So some of you, like me, may have missed traveling recently. We're gonna get back to that eventually. And this book I thought was incredibly interesting because it's all about how there are literary locations around the world Like, you could devise a trip purely based on visiting a bunch of literary locations. Or you could say, hey, I'm going to England. What are the kinds of things I can visit in England that tie into books? And that's what this book is for. So if you want to set up a literary road trip to go to some different spots of, authors' homes or places where your favorite book has taken place, or different things like that, you could do that. Or if you know you're already going somewhere, you could find out how many things are in the area or within driving distance that you could go to explore. And so that's a really interesting thing. And what was fun about this is, just as soon as I had chosen this book and I bought it for the library with Friends of the Library money, thank you to the Friends of the Ponte Vedra Beach Branch Library, no sooner did I do that and think, oh, I can't wait to check that book out when it comes in. I put myself on the list. I got to take myself off the list because my brother Frank, my younger brother, sent me this book for my birthday. So I'm still reading it. I haven't read it cover to cover yet, but I'm really, really enjoying it. And it's really a fun way to look at travel in a whole new way. So for example, like my parents went to Prince Edward Island, where of course Anne of Green Gables took place. And this book has several mentions of different places you can go on Prince Edward Island to celebrate that book. So it's really very, very useful to think about places you might want to deliberately travel to connect with books, or ways that you can connect with books while you're already on the road. So the next book is The Desegregation of Public Libraries in the Jim Crow South, Civil Rights and Local Activism. So this is a very interesting part of our history. We know about desegregation, we know about the civil rights, and this is how it specifically impacted libraries. And I think that's a really interesting thing to read about, because once again, libraries today are all about embracing everybody. We want everyone to come through the door. We don't want you to feel like that just because you look a certain way, you talk a certain way, you come from a certain place, you come from a specific walk of life, that in any way invalidates your value in coming to the library or your ability to come to the library. Quite the opposite. We're just happy that you're walking in the doors and you want to use the library for a program, to check out books, to meet with for a group, for a meeting, or just to utilize the space and feel like you're with other people. So this is an interesting time in our history because that was not the case. Not all people were welcome at all libraries, and that really goes against the grain of what libraries were about. So it was an interesting read in the sense of how the librarians and the library staff felt about things, and kind of what they were expected to do as a result of the Jim Crow South. Unfortunately, today we enjoy meeting people of all kinds, all different walks of life, and it makes for a really interesting career, getting to know all these different people who might not all be together at the same place at the same time, but come together because they love their library, they love reading, and they love just connecting with their community. So another book in a similar vein about the history of libraries is Freedom Libraries, and this is the untold story of libraries for African Americans in the South. So there were some libraries in the Jim Crow South that were for African Americans, and one of the most touching things about this book, when you open the book to the first chapter, and the first chapter is about this little boy. He's walked from his house to the library because many years ago you could do that. You could do that. Things were a lot less urban than they are now. Libraries were much more neighborhood kind of institutions. There weren't as many streets and traffic lights and cars and things like that. And here he is, he's 10, 11 years old, walking to the library, comes in the library, and the children's librarian greets him by name. She's seeing him, every single week, and he wants to check out a book. And she really wants to check out that book to him, but unfortunately, the way the library is set up, this particular book has to be checked out by an adult. It's just one of the rules. But it was a book that he really wanted to read. So she was determined to find a way that he could check this book out. Not because it wasn't inappropriate for children, but there was some rule or something like that. And she just looked at him and thought, you know, I need to find a way to get this book in the hands of this child. And what blew my mind was, who was the child? None other than Martin Luther King Jr., a regular library user, known by his children's librarian, who was dedicated to making sure he got his hands on this book because she knew it was something that would really make a difference in his life, just as he grew up to make the difference in so many people's lives. So that was really, really inspiring. So definitely a good read, and another part of history that you may or may not be aware of. And that's one of the great things about books, is they open up your vistas of knowledge far beyond anything you could have possibly imagined. So our next book is called The Book Collectors, a Band of Syrian Rebels and the Stories that Carried Them Through a War. So again, it's like the books that I talked about in my first presentation, how books can impact people in history, how they empower people, how they give the people that read them freedom, an opportunity to expand their horizons and their minds and the impact that they make. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at history and the impact that books can make on them. And in war times especially, how those books can help somebody carry on and find the strength to go on. So, you know, we have several different kinds of books like this. So if you love history and you love libraries and you love books, then these are the perfect kind of books for you, because they combine all of those different things. Much like, in a similar vein, Information Hunters, when librarians, soldiers, and spies banded together in World War II Europe. So once again, librarians are here at the forefront of history. They're combining with soldiers and spies to make a difference in World War II. And again, maybe a part of history you've not yet read about, but really would be interested in reading about, and how all these very different people came together to make such a positive impact in such a devastating war. So again, you know, it's amazing how much at the forefront libraries are, how central that they've been to wars, to propaganda, to campaigns, to liberating their citizens, you know, depending on how they were used. If they were used for good, they brought forth strength and liberation and understanding and support. And if they were used for ill, they could have been used for propaganda or supporting a platform that had no business being supported, or for, you know, disengaging people or confusing them about what was really important. So I was really impressed to see how much libraries were right at the center of everything, really. The same with, of course, Syria's secret library, Reading and Redemption in a Town Under Siege. So again, you've got a book that talks about the impact that libraries have. And this was a secret library that gave this town a refuge. And that's one of the things that's interesting to me about libraries, because libraries are not warehouses of books. They're not just shelves of books in a building. You could have shelves of books in any building and that would just be a repository. That's not a library. Library is a whole nother institution. A library is, you have the books and they're cataloged and they're in a specific place, and you have people who are the gatekeepers, the librarians, the library staff, who can help you access that knowledge and where you can enjoy that knowledge and engage with that knowledge and be a part of that knowledge. And so I think that's one of the many things that make libraries so incredibly special. So that is the end of part 2 of Read-Alikes to the Library Book. I hope you enjoyed both parts 1 and part 2. And now that you've read the library book, or you're about to read the library book, you've got a lot of new ideas about books and ebooks that you can check out from our library system and dive on into. So just like at the end of the first presentation, right after this presentation ends, there'll be a slide that tells you about the books that I've covered today. All of the books that I covered in part 1 and part 2 are available in our library's catalog. Several are available both as print books and as ebooks. And this is just a sampling of the books that we have about libraries and reading and librarians and all those different things. So don't think that this is all that there is. This is just a little sampling, a little taste. So I hope you found something here that was great to read. Thank you so much for joining us for St. John's Reads 2021. We hope you enjoyed the library book and our programming and our read-alikes, and hopefully you're going to register and be a part of the second annual Lace Up for Libraries here at the end of the month. And we can't wait to celebrate St. John's Reads 2022 with you next year. Have a great day and happy reading. Bye.